Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mr. Bench's Book Reviews. What's in the box today? Oh, it's jammed. Oh dear. Can literally not get this open. Sorry, bear with me. Not sure what's happened here. There we go. It is a book called Tales from Beatrix Potter by Beatrix Potter. Now, I've done some of these before because it has more than one tale. And today we are going to do the tale of the Flopsy Bunnies on page 99. Now I should warn you. No, I'll not warn you. I think we'll be alright today. Just in previous ones of these, some of the pages have been missing from the book. This is quite an old book, and some of its pages are missing. There's probably a connection there. But I think we may be alright today. So it starts off the tale of the Flopsy Bunnies. I don't know if those bunnies are related to Peter Rabbit, who's a famous Potter bunny, and I don't know if this bloke here is Mr. McGregor, who shows up in Peter Rabbit, which I have reviewed on the channel. I'll link it here. Tale of the Flopsy Bunnies. It is said that the effect of eating too much lettuce is soporific, which I think means makes you feel sleepy. I have never felt sleepy after eating lettuces, but then I am not a rabbit. They certainly had a very soporific effect upon the Flopsy Bunnies. Well, there they kind of give you the... By saying I have never felt sleepy, they kind of give you a clue about what soporific probably means. So that's quite nice. They're basically teaching a new word. This I guess, is just the author, the narrator, Beatrix. And there's some bunnies sleeping. When Benjamin Bunny grew up, I believe Benjamin Bunny is another bunny who has his own book. He married his cousin. Oh dear. He married his cousin Flopsy. Well, that's not going to be great for the gene pool. I don't know if that's common amongst rabbits. Rudy Giuliani, I think, was married to his cousin. But I don't think he was a rabbit. They had a large family, and they were very improvident and cheerful. I don't really know the word improvident. I'm going to guess it means they played a lot, mischievous, maybe something like that. It's probably the opposite of provident, whatever that means. I do not remember the separate names of their children. They were generally called the Flopsy Bunnies, so named after their mother, I suppose. Okay. Well, what's she called then? I mean, he's called Benjamin Bunny, and she's called Flopsy something, and then they're called the Flopsy Bunnies. Okay. As though there was not always quite enough to eat. Oh no, sorry, there's no though there. As there was not always quite enough to eat, Benjamin used to borrow cabbages from Flopsy's brother, Peter Rabbit. Oh, so Peter Rabbit does show up. This is very much in the Peter Rabbit world then. Who kept a nursery garden? Did he? He keeps a garden. He seems to have a nursery garden. It seems to be some sort of allotment. Sometimes Peter Rabbit had no cabbages to spare. Well, I don't know if this is set much later than the Peter Rabbit story, because there he's going off trying to steal things from Mr. McGregor. But if he has his own allotment garden, you wonder why he would do that, unless he's specifically trying to steal cabbages because he has none to spare. So he's their uncle then. If he's married to the mother, he's their uncle. So it's Uncle Peter, providing them with vegetables. When this happened, the Flopsy Bunnies went across the field to a rubbish heap in the ditch outside Mr. McGregor's garden. Well, that's smart, because you don't actually want to go into the garden or you get into all kinds of problems, as their uncle will have told them. I guess it is set later then, if it's like the next generation. There's like the kids, like, you do get these things. You get like, I don't know, like spin-offs, like you might have Sherlock Holmes, and then you have like Son of Sherlock, and it's some kid thinks he's a detective. Not sure there's a Sherlock Holmes one, but you do get things like that. Can't If I think of what I'm thinking of, I'll tell you. Mr. McGregor's rubbish heap was a mixture. There might be a. Is there like a kid Superman who has like superpowers? Don't know. Mr. McGregor, he must be quite old now then. Mr. McGregor, because he didn't seem the most sprightly of characters in the Peter Rabbit book. Mr. McGregor's rubbish heap was a mixture. There were jam pots and paper bags and mountains of chopped grass. You wouldn't get that nowadays. Nowadays we have rubbish sorting. Normally your jam pot, if that's a glass jar, and your paper would be separate, and your chopped grass. Those are three very distinct. I have three different bins for those in my garden. But McGregor doesn't seem to. Mountains of chopped grass from the mowing machine, which always tasted oily. I guess they mean the grass tastes oily. It must be an oil-powered lawnmower rather than an electric one. And some rotten vegetable marrows and an old boot or two. One day, oh joy, there were a quantity of overgrown lettuces which had shot, in inverted commas for some reason, into flower. Well, that's what they like then. Oh, maybe the soporific thing, maybe we're going to find out. Maybe that was actually the end of the story, where they're asleep having eaten a load of lettuces, and we're just going to find out how they got into that state of slumber. The Flopsy Bunnies simply stuffed lettuces. I guess they mean stuffed themselves with lettuces. They're mixed up like a bit of mince and rice and like stuffing the lettuce like you might do with a pepper, a bell pepper. By degrees, one after another, they were overcome with slumber. Yeah, it's the soporific nature of those lettuces, and lay down in the mown grass. Benjamin was not so much overcome as his children. Before going to sleep, he was sufficiently wide awake to put a paper bag over his head to keep off the flies. Does that mean the children bunnies are going to get attacked by flies? The little Flopsy Bunnies slept delightfully in the warm sun. From the lawn beyond the garden. Oh, well, they've got the nice sun on them, and Benjamin doesn't because he's got this bag on his head. It's weird that the guy who puts a bag on his head is the intelligent one, the one who's like really showing excellent mental aptitude. Anyway, the little Flopsy Bunny slept delightfully in the warm sun. From the lawn beyond the garden came the distant clackety sound of the mowing machine. The blue bottles buzzed around the wall. Blue bottles, those aren't. That's not like Bombay Sapphire bottles in the rubbish dump. That's these are these insecty beetle things. Buzzed around the wall, and a little old mouse picked over the rubbish among the jam pots. I can tell you her name. She was called Thomasina Tittlemouse, a wood mouse with a long tail. Almost sounds like she has her own book too, if she's got a name like that. She rustled across the paper bag and awakened Benjamin Bunny. The mouse apologized profusely and said that she knew Peter Rabbit. Is that just like using her connection so he doesn't yell at her? She goes, no, I'm mates with your brother. No, not your brother, your brother-in-law then. Although in this family, who knows? The mouse apologized profusely and said that she knew Peter Rabbit. While she and Benjamin were talking, okay, so they're getting into conversation then, he's not really that cross. Close under the wall, they heard a heavy tread above their heads, and suddenly Mr. McGregor emptied out a sackful of lawn mowings right up on the top of the sleeping Flopsy Bunnies. Doesn't sound that dangerous. Benjamin shrank down under his paper bag. The mouse hid in a jam pot. I don't know if it suggests that Mr. McGregor doesn't like people rummaging through his rubbish. The little rabbits smiled sweetly in their sleep under the shower of grass. They did not awake because the lettuces had been so soporific. Maybe that first page where they kind of explain what soporific means was written extra after they'd done the first draft. Maybe the editor was like, people aren't going to know what this means, Beatrix. And then she went back and added in that first page. But it's made quite a nice framing to the story. They dreamt that their mother Flopsy was tucking them up in a haybed. Mr. McGregor looked down after emptying his sack. He saw some funny little brown tips of ears sticking up through the lawn mowings. He stared at them for some time. Is Mr. McGregor the kind of guy who eats rabbit? I don't know. There's a picture of someone putting some rabbits in a sack here. Presently, a fly settled on one of them, and it moved. Mr. McGregor climbed down onto the rubbish heap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little rabbits. Leetle is written L-E-E-T-L-E. Now, I don't know if that is supposed to be a Scottish accent. I'm not going to try to do one. But he is called McGregor, and that is an unusually spelt word, so I'm going to guess that that's supposed to represent a Scottish accent. All the other words, I mean, six and little, presumably have the same vowel sound in them, or very similar ones, and yet they're six. He hasn't written six little rabbits. Anyway, said he as he dropped them into his sack. The Flopsy Bunnies dreamt that their mother was turning them over in bed. They stirred a little in their sleep, but still they did not wake up, or they are being put into a sack. That's probably not how they want to end their days. I was saying eat rabbits, he could be trying to get them for their fur. You know, rabbits have multiple uses. I think a rabbit's foot can be like a good luck charm. You can probably sell that at some weird market. Mr. McGregor tied up the sack and left it on the wall. He went to put away the mowing machine. Quite like mowing machine, it alliterates nicely. Normally I would call it a lawnmower, but mowing machine makes it sound a bit more industrial, or agricultural, I guess. While he was gone, Mrs. Flopsy Bunny, that'll be the mum, who had remained at home. I like the way she's just called Mrs. Flopsy Bunny, the way she's kept her name. She's not Mrs. Benjamin Bunny. And the kids are named after her too. Shows the well, I mean, I'm not going to say emancipation, but shows that even though it's quite an old book, that the status of the female is still quite good. She'd remained at home. She came across the field. She looked suspiciously at the sack and wondered where everybody was. Well, she's very close to getting it then. Maybe that's her intuition. Then the mouse came out of her jam pot. I keep saying jam pot. I don't know if these are glass jars after all, because I was suggesting they should have been or could have been recycled in like a bottle bank for glass. But it's possible that this repeated use of the word pot is making me think they are possibly made of ceramic or something. And Benjamin took the paper bag off his head, and they told the doleful tale. Doleful, I guess it means like sad or something. Not a word I'm familiar with. Benjamin and Flopsy were in despair. They could not undo the string. Okay, so Benjamin and possibly the mouse know what happened to the rabbits. They were able to, the little ones, the bunnies. Um, so they know they're in the sack. They just need to get into it. They just need some sort of tool. But Mrs. Tittlemouse was a resourceful person. I like the use of the word person there, because person, you might think, would always have to be human, you know, like a McGregor kind of character. But just saying a mouse can be a person too, it's just very clear. I think the word is anthropomorphication. Even though Tittlemouse is not wearing any clothes, and sometimes I kind of assume that the clothes-wearing ones are ones with names and characters and personalities, more human-like in that regard. Whereas in this case, we have just like a naked mouse, but being referred to very clearly with a name, a title, Mrs. First name, second name, and even being called a person explicitly. She nibbled a hole in the bottom corner of the sack. Very good. The little rabbits were pulled out and pinched to wake them. Their parents stuffed the empty sack with 3 rotten vegetable marrows, an old blacking brush, that I guess that's like a shoe polish brush, but I may be wrong, and 2 decayed turnips. Oh, okay, so they're putting stuff in the sack so that McGregor doesn't realize the rabbits have escaped. Then they all hid under a bush and watched for Mr. McGregor. Like they could just run off, but they want to just torment him now and enjoy his suffering. Mr. McGregor wants revenge, I guess, which is fairly natural, but risky. The longer you hang around there, the more likely it is that McGregor's going to see you and put you in a new sack that doesn't have a hole in it. Mr. McGregor came back and picked up the sack and carried it off. He carried it hanging down as if it were rather heavy. The Flopsy Bunnies followed at a safe distance. I guess they must have chosen marrows, the brush, and the turnips that were too big to fall out the hole. They watched him go into his house, and then they crept up to the window to listen. The young bunnies don't wear clothes either, but the parents do. But Mrs. Tittlemouse is presumably of age, if she's Mrs. So I don't think it's a sign of maturity, the clothes wearing. McGregor is dressed, but then he's an adult human, and they tend to be dressed when they're walking around the garden. Mr. McGregor threw down the sack on the stone floor in a way that would have been extremely painful to the Flopsy Bunnies if they had happened to have been inside it. It's a pretty brutal way of killing bunnies, putting them in a sack and slamming them against the floor. They could hear him drag his chair on the flags and chuckle, which sounds quite mean here. In Peter Rabbit, the other one, you feel sympathy for Mr. McGregor because you've got this rabbit trying to steal all this stuff, whereas here he just seems to be very much the bad guy rather than the victim. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little rabbits. I hope they're not making him sound Scottish because Scottish people are meant to be baddies, said Mr. McGregor, because I don't really like that kind of thing. It'd be alright if it was Peter McRabbit, so they're all Scottish, but if you have one person who has a different like accent or comes from a different country or whatever, and then they are also the one evil person, then that always seems like unfair stereotyping. What's that? What have they been spoiling now? Inquired Mrs. McGregor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little fat rabbits, repeated Mr. McGregor, counting on his fingers. Suggests he has 6 fingers, which is possible. Something people don't know, the gene, I think it is, that's responsible for how many fingers you have. It's called something like Sonic the Hedgehog gene or Sonic Hedgehog or something. I think that's true. So Mr. McGregor must have had an overactive Sonic Hedgehog gene while he was developing as a fetus. Interesting. I don't know if that's another sign of like in a long time ago, people with 6 fingers might have been considered witches or whatever, because anything that was a bit abnormal, they didn't know this Sonic the Hedgehog thing. So maybe that's another thing. He's like trying to just paint him as some evil person capable of witchcraft and rabbit eating. The way he says fat rabbits now suggests that he is interested in eating them, because the girth would probably be of more interest to someone eating the meat than to someone just skinning them for their hides. Don't you be silly. What do you mean, you silly old man? In the sack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, replied Mr. McGregor. The youngest Flopsy Bunny got upon the windowsill. Now they're watching. Mrs. McGregor took hold of the sack and felt it. She said she could feel 6. Oh, did they put 6 things in? Oh, I wasn't concentrating there. Oh yeah, 3 rotten marrows, an old blacking brush, and 2 decayed turnips. Oh, so they even counted to make sure there were 6 things. Those rabbits are quite smart then. Although it may have been Tittlemouse giving them an idea, because she seemed pretty on top of it. But they must be old rabbits, because they were so hard and all different shapes. Not fit to eat, but the skins will do fine to line my old cloak. Well, there you go. She's picking up on the fact that there are multiple usages for rabbit. Line your old cloak, shouted Mr. McGregor. I shall sell them and buy myself baccy. Oh, he just wants to sell them. But presumably, if he's concentrating on them being fat, he's going to sell them to someone who wants to eat them. tobacco smoking is probably not necessarily a sign of being evil, which it might be nowadays, in like modern films or television, possibly even books. Um, but smoking has got a bit of a bad reputation now, whereas when this was written 100 years ago, I don't think there'd be any. I doubt that was going through Potter's mind when she wrote that. Rabbit tobacco? No, I shall skin them and cut off their heads. Um, I don't think he means rabbit tobacco. He means just get some cash and use that to buy regular tobacco. Unless that's kind of like blood money, money you get from blood. So rabbit tobacco is tobacco you get from rabbit. They're husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. McGregor. So maybe they have a weird way of talking to each other that's not always clear to outsiders such as myself. Mrs. McGregor untied the sack and put her hand inside. When she felt the vegetables, she became very, very angry. She said that Mr. McGregor had done it a purpose, which done it on purpose, though that may again be a Scottish phrase. And Mr. McGregor was very angry too. One of the rotten marrows came flying through the kitchen window. The window's open, so he's not smashed it. He's just spied an open window and thought, I'll throw this marrow out. And hit the youngest Flopsy Bunny. It was rather hurt. Well, there it is, being whacked by a flying marrow. That's unfortunate. But it comes with the territory if you're playing tricks on people and peering through their windows and laughing at them. You can expect to get a marrow in the back. They've drawn the bunny's pained expression there quite nicely, actually. Getting its comeuppance. And Benjamin and Flopsy thought that it was time to go home. It's quite interesting that the parents like joining them. Because if you have the Flopsy Bunnies, that's what the kids, right? You might think it's them getting off to mischief. I mean, they are described as improvident earlier on. But actually, it's the parents almost, well, almost encouraging it or even leading the process. So Mr. McGregor did not get his tobacco, and Mrs. McGregor did not get her rabbit skins. But next Christmas, Thomasina Tittlemouse got a present of enough rabbit wool to make herself a cloak and a hood, and a handsome muff and a pair of warm mittens. I guess the rabbits just somehow generate wool, do they? Is it just like like bits of fluff off their hair, off their fur? Because you don't shear rabbits, do you? Oh, but that's nice that they've thanked her for her help. Thomasina Tittlemouse. She seems like quite a character. She's a very interesting person. I would recommend that the author write a book about her if she's looking to, and if she hasn't yet done so. I'm pretty sure she's dead. But I'm saying it's the sort of thing you could recommend. Well, that was quite interesting. I like the start, this opening about lettuces are soporific. It's like kind of a nice little intro thing, and also very useful because it explains a key moment in the story. Um, and I was a bit iffy on the use of lethal. I generally don't. I'm not a huge fan of writing in dialect. And one reason is that it kind of implies that the reader is that everyone else is talking in some sort of received pronunciation, which doesn't seem plausible. And it also kind of implies that if I am Scottish, then why shouldn't I just read everyone's voices in my own accent or dialect? And also this kind of potential implication that the outsider, the foreigner, is the mean guy, which I don't really approve of. But that was quite a nice story, I suppose. Quite like the way the bunny got a marrow in the back near the end, because it serves you right, really. I mean, obviously, originally they were kind of the victims, but you just escape and move on. You don't need to toy with McGregor's emotions like that, and his family as well. Like, it's one thing to torment Mr. McGregor for having almost murdered you, but to go after his wife like that as well, who's got her hopes up. And then there's even creating bad blood between them because she thinks he's done it a purpose to her. No, they've not. I don't. I mean, they don't have any court system or anything to go with, to get him for attempted murder. So they're just trying to get some sort of justice, I suppose. And it's not easy when you're just a rabbit or even a family of rabbits, inbred rabbits, um, to know how best to exact revenge. So I shouldn't criticize, but I feel the marrow is it evens the balance slightly in terms of justice. So that's good. Good sense of justice in that book. I approve. And on that note, I will say thank you for watching, and do join me again for another of Mr. Bench's book reviews. Bye bye.